and she had to leave very early in the morning for her job. However, she was always home pretty early on in the afternoon, and this allowed her to be back home in time for when Tabitha would return back home after school. Deborah noted that when she woke up on the 29th of April, that Tabitha was seen sleeping at the foot of her and Beau's bed. Now, Tabitha did this often. Like I said, she was very close to her parents, and she had kind of fashioned a pallet bed at the end of their bed and was often seen in there, just wanting to be closer with her family. Deborah left for work as usual, and she last saw Tabitha and her husband, Beau, still sleeping. Beau had to leave for his job at 7 a.m. that morning, and as he was leaving, he woke up Tabitha for school. Beau told Tabitha that morning that he loved her and that he would see her that evening, and then reminded her that she needed to leave the house at 7:50 that morning in order to catch the school bus. Now, Tabitha regularly rode the school bus to school, so this was a very, very typical morning for her. Now, Beau and Deborah had always kept a close eye on their children, and in the mornings, due to work schedules, this was really the only time that they were ever away from Tabitha. However, her older sister, Jamie, was there, if there was ever an emergency, but Jamie at the time was still with her two children and they were still sleeping. So after Tabitha's parents would get up and go to work, Tabitha would regularly get herself ready for school. She was 13 and fully capable of doing so, and the bus stop was not super far from their house on Lillian Street, so it was a very quick walk for her. At 7:50 in the morning on April the 29th, Tabitha left her house and walked towards the bus stop, and this bus stop was only 1 block away. Now, sometimes this bus stop did not have many children that went to it, so occasionally there would not be any kids at this bus stop. So Tabitha's parents always instructed her that if there were no children at the first bus stop, she was to walk 1 block further, and there were always kids at this second bus stop. It was a bit more populated over there with children, so like I said, if there weren't any kids at the first stop, Tabitha would always walk to the second stop, which was normal. Deborah arrived back home shortly after 1 p.m. that day, and she was expecting Tabitha to arrive home around 4 p.m. that afternoon as usual. When 4 p.m. hit and Tabitha was still not home, Deborah began to grow slightly concerned. She allowed 10 more minutes to pass just in case the bus had been a little bit late. She didn't want to panic right away, but after 10 minutes had passed and Tabitha was still nowhere to be seen, Deborah began to worry even more. She stopped by the neighbor's house who lived next door and asked if she happened to see Tabitha that day at all. The Tudors' neighbor said that she did not see Tabitha, but agreed to walk up to the bus stop with Deborah to see was then decided that Deborah and Bo would both go back to Bailey Middle School to check again for Tabitha. When they got back to the school, they found the doors locked, so they continued to knock on the school's doors until a custodian let them in. Now, after being let inside the school, unsure of who the guy was, who MDL was. Now, there was apparently a family friend who I'm not sure if he had the same initials as MDL or not, but the police interviewed him. However, they did not find anything of substance from his interview and believed he was not involved in Tabitha's disappearance. A few days later, the police then received a tip from another boy in Tabitha's class. Now, this boy says that he saw Tabitha get into a car on the morning that she disappeared. The boy that came forward was 11 years old, and he was at the second bus stop that Tabitha was supposed to walk to if there were no children at the first bus stop. The boy noticed that morning that Tabitha was walking down the hill towards the bus stop on the morning of April the 29th. The hill was rather long, and the boy could see that a man had driven up to Tabitha, and that Tabitha got into this man's car. The boy claimed that the man in the car was a black man wearing a hat and driving a red car, but the boy did not know who this man was at all. Now, the police brought in dogs to search this area as well, and they lost the scent of Tabitha between the two bus stops, which validates kind of that boy's sighting of Tabitha getting into an unknown car. However, when the police, were looking and, kind of trying to validate this tip, they were never, ever able to do so. I'm not sure if it was just because the boy was so young that they did not trust him, but they just never were able to confirm that this was a true sighting. The police did question, though, an ex-boyfriend of Tabitha's sister, Jamie, who had lived with the Tudors just a few months prior, and then Jamie and this ex broke up. Now, this ex-boyfriend happened to fit the description of the man who stopped to pick up Tabitha the morning she disappeared. However, the ex-boyfriend did not own a car, and he passed a polygraph test, so the police believed that he was not involved in Tabitha's disappearance at all. 5 months after this, after Tabitha had disappeared, the police focused on a suspect Tuders at this point did not run away, but there is a good chance that she possibly somehow got involved in human trafficking. Whether that was just somebody drove by at the right time and saw her and abducted her, or if it was somebody that she knew or even recognized. I really truly hope that Tabitha's family gets the answers that they deserve in this case. It's been